Hello and welcome to TrailHeads, where the journey starts here. I'm your host, Jim Barrett. It'll come as no surprise that homelessness is on the rise in our country. More than ever, people are experiencing homelessness for the first time. From 2019 to 2023, the number of people who entered emergency shelters for the first time increased by more than 23%. So what can be done? Well, today I'm speaking with Frank Schiro. He's the founder of the Breakfast Club. It's a very special group of volunteers at the Bridge to Home homeless shelter in Santa Clarita, California. It's about 25 miles north of Los Angeles. So, hi, Frank.
Hi, Jim.
Bridge to Home has been around about 30 years, right?
I think about 27 now. Yes.
Okay, coming up on
It was
30.
called something a little different at the beginning. It wasn't called Bridge to Home, but it was Santa Clarita Community Development Corp. And some years later, they changed the name to Bridge to Home.
Bridge to Home definitely sounds better, I think.
Yes, it does. It certainly does. I agree.
Well, like maybe other shelters, maybe not like other shelters. This is the only one I've had an extended relationship with. Bridge to Home has a number of teams that come in and volunteer. Some people bring in sack lunches. It might be churches, it might be scouts, it might be neighborhoods, it might be any number of groups of people, and individuals come in as well. What distinguishes the Breakfast Club from maybe some of the other groups that serve there at Bridge to
Oh,
Home?
sure. So the Breakfast Club is a group of volunteers. I think there's approximately 15 or 17 people total. We don't all come every Saturday, but basically we serve a hot breakfast twice a month. And so um, the distinguishing characteristic of the Breakfast Club is when we go there, our team, the Breakfast Club serves a really nice, amazing hot meal. We serve breakfast burritos with homemade salsa, bacon, sausage, fried eggs, scrambled eggs, country potatoes with peppers and onions. We serve blueberry pancakes. We also serve fruit salad, and I'm probably forgetting some other things. We really serve an amazing meal, and it's hot, and that's what really distinguishes it between the other days because basically they get a cold breakfast. The homeless residents there, volunteers come in and basically serve like cereals or maybe oatmeal with a microwave, maybe toast using the toaster and bagels. That's what they typically get. But it's a very, very special breakfast that this group of volunteers creates every 2 weeks, twice a month.
And it's also prepared on the spot, right? It's not like it's brought in coolers and then heated up, right?
That's correct. All the volunteers contribute to purchasing all the groceries, and it is prepared there. There was a lady there. We got there at 6 a.m., and this lady was just standing at the window where we would normally serve, and she stood there at least, I'd say, 20 minutes. And what was amazing is she was just like mesmerized. She couldn't believe that all these volunteers, I don't know, there must have been at least 10 of us in there. We were all just chopping away, preparing, getting everything ready to cook. And she was just sitting there going, I can't believe this. And it just brought her so much joy. So that's what's really cool about it. When the volunteers are in there and they're literally preparing, and people could see all the volunteers through the serving window doing all this work at 6 o'clock in the morning for them. It's a very, very special morning, and they very, very much appreciate it.
Was that by design then, your design to have the Breakfast Club be something like that? Was it designed to make the clients there feel special?
Absolutely. The whole idea that I had from the very beginning was I want this breakfast to be really, really special. I know they don't get this kind of food very often. I know they don't get served a breakfast, a hot breakfast, maybe ever, while they're there. It's just a cold breakfast. So the whole premise was we're going to roll up our sleeves. The volunteers are going to show the residents that we care and that we are going to serve a really special breakfast for them.
So, Frank, what I want to do is give people a place to go if they're ready to volunteer or they want to find out what they can do. www.btohome.org, not .com. Again, btohome, bridgetohome.org. Go there and you can click on volunteer or donate, a number of different options if you want to start to get involved. Talk a little bit about how your involvement in the shelter and starting up the Breakfast Club, how that came together.
Yes, about 20, now it's 27 years ago. I think it was 1997. My mother-in-law and my father-in-law served the very first season that the shelter opened here in Santa Clarita, which is at the sports complex in Canyon Country. That's where it originally was. Approximately 35 or 40 homeless residents that were there to be able to sleep. They would get a meal at night, a hot meal, hopefully for dinner, and then a cold breakfast in the morning. And then they would have to leave and they can come back. They couldn't stay there all day, but at least they can get out of the cold at night. So my mother-in-law and my father-in-law volunteered through their church to stay there overnight as security. So I met them there the next morning and just helped them serve breakfast. And while I was there, the warehouse it had an employee kitchen, and it had a stove and a refrigerator and basically everything we really need to serve a breakfast. But they were getting served cereals and so on. So I thought to myself, you know what? I don't know how to cook really, but I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to come back next week, and I'm going to serve a Saturday breakfast, and I'm going to serve them eggs and bacon and hash browns. And each season it just got better and better, and some of the volunteers became regulars.
I want to jump in real quick because I met you, thankfully, in 2009. My family, my ex-wife, my kids joined Real Life Church in January of 2009. And Real Life Church, like a lot of churches these days, have what we called at the time life groups or community groups, whatever you want to call them. But the theme of it was other people in your church community to sort of do life together. So there was some Bible study, but there was also what I love this idea was the pastor at the time, Rusty George, talking about his goal was for Real Life to be one of those churches that walk the talk. And I loved so much how Bridge to Home was doing that and your group of volunteers. Our kids were pretty young at the time. Our youngest was 3, and my older 2 were 7 and 8. And I said, can they come? Is that something that can happen? You said, absolutely.
Yes, we would allow kids there, but I would always, of course, preface it by saying, please keep them in the kitchen. They were there, and my kids were there at a very, very young age. And as other volunteers brought their kids, we had many, many kids come to the Bridge to Home, the Breakfast Club, and serve breakfast with us. And it was such a joy, to see the kids serve. My kids got an awful lot out of it. I know it's a very just like your kids, I know it impacted their life and their journey in life. And they have very fond memories of learning how to serve. And serving is now part of their lives.
Yeah.
It really impacted the way they see those that are less fortunate, those that are marginalized, and so on.
Yeah, my middle son, Carson, was probably the one who stuck with it the most regularly over time. And he became sort of the go-to bacon and sausage guy. He would work with one of the other regulars, Jack. We'll talk about Jack in a minute. But
Yeah.
Jack really took Carson under his wing and showed him the ropes of how to prepare and to cook breakfast for essentially about 60 people. And Carson loved it. He didn't love the part being a little kid about having to wake him up at 5:30 in the morning and go. But eventually he was passionate enough about it that if I didn't bother him and didn't try to wake him up, he would actually say eventually, Dad, can you please make me get up? And I said, I'll make a deal. You set all your clothes out the night before and have them ready to go. And then, yes, I will wake you up and make sure we get out the door. And he goes, okay, great. So it was wonderful. And then for Carson, 10 years down the line, when he was about to complete his Eagle Scout, Carson's was working with a team of other scouts and some parents to build a shelter for Bridge to Home. A lot of the homeless clients have a large 50-pound pack that has most of their gear in it, and then a smaller day pack that they can use to carry around to go for jobs or to visit people, whatever they do during the day.
Yeah.
So his storage facility was for the homeless residents to secure their big packs and have it locked so that it wouldn't get stolen. So he did that, but it was fun to see, when you're talking about having our kids get passionate about serving, it was nice to see Carson come full circle with that a lot of the scouts would do great projects. There's a lot of great projects for the scouts, but this really came from his heart and his history of having been doing this since he was 8 years old.
I would add, I can assure you that Carson, throughout his life, will view homelessness differently and view serving the homeless differently than most. My daughter now, she has worked for Hope of the Valley in the past, and now she's working for Los Angeles Housing Authority for homelessness. So she's very passionate about serving the homeless and about the plight of the homeless. And even though she has her master's degree, she is focusing, working to help the homeless. So it definitely impacted her and many other kids like your kids and many others that have gone through there. I know it shaped the way, the way that they look at life and serving.
You know, those of us who serve the homeless and have interactions with the homeless on a regular basis have sort of a different take on it. And there are compassionate people out there. But what has been your experience in general in talking to the general public about Bridge to Home and serving the homeless?
Not great, honestly. There's such a stigma out there that the homeless don't want to work, or they're a bunch of drug addicts, or if you're, I have got people that in my life that feel that, I'm doing all this help and I'm trying to help these people. And what are you getting out of it? Are they getting better? Are they getting out of homelessness? And it's kind of frustrating because what I've come to learn, and I'm sure you have as well, Jim, is that each person's story is very, very unique. You can't throw them in the same story and like, oh, they don't want to work. So many people have had awful, awful trauma in their lives, mental illness, and yes, substance abuse is part of it. With some people, the substance abuse actually even creates a lot of mental illness with abusers over time. So my experience is people think, oh, well, they just don't want to work. Well, if people were around the homeless community like you and I have been over the years, they would come to realize that each person's story is very unique, and these people many of them would love to work, but they are so many things working against them. I don't think they can get a job even if they tried. And so I think that society in general is they've lost a lot of compassion about what these folks are going through.
Another part of that too, I'll say, and especially in SoCal, is that it is so prohibitively expensive to find housing these days. And if you have that event in your life, whether it's a health incident that happens or a layoff or whatever that event is, it's really challenging to recover from that and build back up from the beginning.
I completely agree. And the longer the homeless community are homeless, the more they descend into mental illness and just inability to take care of themselves. It's a very, very sad situation, but I see it, and I know you see it all the time. But there's no regrets because you have to meet them where they are and blessing them with dignity that they count and they mean something to us and that we're going to try to help them no matter what the outcome.
There's one guy I used to take him to breakfast every so often. He was one of the guys I just know. He's a few years older than me. He worked at one of the aerospace companies. He had a great union job, and he and his wife fell on hard times and eventually got divorced. And he said, "Hey, this is all on me. I don't blame my wife at all. This is what I fell into was my problem." And he says, in some ways, I have to credit for her for trying to help me get out of it until we finally got divorced. But he fell into drugs and then lost his job and fell into homelessness. And he said, one day I woke up and I was just in the desert. And he said, I woke up freezing in that desert. And he said, that for me was my rock bottom. I had had enough. And so he also said, he says, and this is what made him stand out to me, is that although he was homeless, I wasn't sure about that at first because he was always there helping us set up the chairs and put stuff in place and asking us, what can I do to help? I thought that he was one of the staffers, and he was not. He was a homeless client and had
Yeah.
been for a couple of years. So we had breakfast for a while, and I didn't know what my end result was. I just formed a friendship with him, and I liked him and I respected him. And one day when we were having breakfast, he says, "Jim, can I ask you something? Do I seem crazy to you?" And I smiled a little bit. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll be out there in my tent and I'll look and I'll see some guy yelling at a shopping cart. And it's like, is that the way I look? Is that? And I said, no. I said, even in the couple of years I've seen you, I've seen a vast improvement. Because his big question was, am I ready to get back out there in the workforce again? I said, absolutely, man. I said, it's just the fact that you can step outside yourself and ask that question. People who aren't homeless can't do that. People who aren't having the challenges in their life that you have. Sorry.
Yeah, it touches, it tugs on your heartstrings. I get it, man.
But he did. But it doesn't happen. I'm not trying to say that it happens that way all the time, but
Yeah.
he did. He eventually got housing. It's also harder the longer you are homeless, the harder it is to become unhomeless. Well, he did. He did. He got Section 8 housing and started to work part-time. And that's when I kind of lost track with him. We're Facebook friends, but I haven't talked to him in a few years. But that's one of the things that just brought a smile to my face about the success and however you define that success.
There are some success stories. Like there was one a young lady that comes to mind who has a child. She was at the shelter, and we would serve breakfast. And I think she was probably there a couple of seasons. And I would ask her, what can I do to help you? And she said, I'm approved for the housing for Section 8, but we just can't find a place that will take the Section 8 and the amount of money they're willing to pay. So, long story a little shorter, I took that on, and I interviewed many apartments, and I took her to fill out applications and so on. And anyway, she finally got an apartment, and she was just like so incredibly grateful that she had her own apartment so she could have her son there. She had uh, custody of him. Like I don't know what the arrangement is, like every weekend or whatever it is. And now she was able to have her son stay with her in the apartment, and they could be together in those times. And she was able to now get a job. She already had a job part time, but she was able to increase her hours. And as the assistants, they taper it off. They help out aggressively at first. And then over months, the assistance gets lesser and lesser as these people are able to get hopefully on their feet. And that's what she has been doing. And I touch base with her from time to time. We're like friends. And that's a success story.
I want to
So,
jump in there. I want to
yeah,
comment on something that you said there because
yeah,
when people ask that question, like you were talking about, how can I help? How can I serve? Well, it's not one answer. It's a couple of different. In fact, you and I sort of stand for different aspects to this same question. You, Frank, and others in our small group are amazing after we prepare the breakfast, and oftentimes there's enough for some of us to go ahead and have some ourselves, not that we need it, but more for the breaking bread aspect of it, of going
yeah.
out there and sitting among them and how are you
Oh,
doing? And you are so good at that. And it's such a gift that you have. I don't have that gift. Mine is more facilitating. I'll teach the newcomers, here's where we go. The goal is to do this first and to cut this and try and make the portions like that and to sort of guide the new volunteers to come and doing that. But it's more behind the scenes. It's behind the counter. And I feel like that's what I can do best. And I love that you guys do that.
and I don't have the giftedness that you have for organizing. You kept us organized for so many years, and you do all the things that you do. That's not my gift. So it takes a village. We all have our very unique talents. I believe that we should serve within our lane. Each one of us make up the whole. Each one of us adds to blessing all these people that really need us in different ways.
So Frank, we had a special volunteer for a number of years named Jack. Tell us about Jack.
So Jack and I started mountain biking together every Sunday afternoon for years. We were friends. We would go out on the mountain biking trails around here every week, every Sunday afternoon, and we would just talk and talk about life. He was very involved with the Cancer Society, but did not have any experience with homeless. And I would talk about it occasionally on our trails, and I would tell him what we were doing on Saturdays. And he's like, he expressed a little interest initially, but, never really, we would just keep on riding. And, I didn't have an agenda, but I would say occasionally, hey, if you ever want to go, let me know. Well, finally, one week we were riding, and he said, you know what, Frank, I want to go with you next Saturday when you serve. Well, he served, and he became a major part of the Breakfast Club. His passion was children. He loved the kids that would come in, that we would bring in as volunteers, and he would always take them under his wing. And he ran the bacon station, and he would, show the kids how to cook the bacon with him. And
That
uh,
includes my son. My son Carson was one of the people he took under his wing, and Carson just loved working with Jack. And
oh yeah, and Jack would say, like, even if there was a lot of volunteers that could split the cost of the bacon, he would say, no, 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 I don't want any help. I'm buying the bacon. That's my contribution. He did it every week. We were serving together, and then Jack and I would, and you and many others would serve not only the breakfast, but we would do so many fundraisers together for Bridge to Home. We just shared something special. We cared about serving, and he became a major player in the Breakfast Club, and just miss him dearly. He's since passed away, and he's big hole in our hearts, not having Jack in our group and in my life. But
He was
yes,
amazing. He was just
story,
amazing. Yeah.
amazing guy.
I just loved him. And I loved, again, like you said, seeing him take young people under his wing and teaching them, passing it on like he did so well.
Yeah,
Thank you for telling that story. I thought of another story that a lot of times I will learn from the homeless folks too. Something that they say or they demonstrate will teach me something. I remember we had one guy who was fairly new. He was built like a linebacker. He had tats around his neck. Seemed like somebody who would kick any of our asses, but he wasn't. His character wasn't like that. He was always he would come through the line, and he was also one of the people. Hey, can I help with this? Do you need any help carrying that? Can I move this? Whatever. So he was there to serve too, even though he was there to be served the breakfast. And would always say, "Hey, thank you guys so much. God bless you. You don't have to do this. Thank you." And I remember one day there was this kind of cranky older man who was in line in front of him who was like, "Oh, why don't you have this kind of pancakes? And why'd you cook them that way? It's too overcooked." And just like was complaining about everything. And the guy said, "Look, man, you need to be thankful. You need to if you're going to say anything, you need to just say thank you to this team because they buy the groceries, they bring it every week, and you just need to be grateful." And
yeah,
I didn't. It just occurred to me we all need to be grateful, right? Because it's easy for any of us to complain and gripe about our situation or whatever. But I loved what he stood for. He was this guy who was homeless, and he was there and had maintained his sense of dignity and his sense of respect and was
yeah,
passing that out. He didn't use one single curse word. He didn't grab the guy. He made a statement, and the older man says, "Okay, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you guys." And so I love that. And he was
no,
one.
I
He was
agree.
he was also one of the success stories. We had heard through I remember he was a plumber because he had his own business, and that failed. But he got connected with a larger company and was working again. So I love those kinds of when you can see those results. But again, like you're quick to remind us, it doesn't always happen that way, and that's not what it's always about.
That's not what it's about. And you're dealing with people that some people are not well, and they may express themselves in really ugly ways. That's okay. That's part of it. But I will say, generally speaking, and Jim, we experience this every time we serve. I think I could say every time. There's just a level of gratitude where people pop their head in through the serving window and they say, "Thank you all so much. It was so great. And I really, really appreciate what you guys are doing." And with such sincerity, and that happens every time we serve. Man, it keeps us volunteers coming back, like you and me, year after year after year. Right? We
And
just
to
keep.
and to bring our friends and family and colleagues to come. I mean, so much of our core team is made up with people who you brought or who I brought over time, and who they have ended up bringing other friends of the people we brought. It's nice to see that
Absolutely.
paying forward. The Breakfast Club has been I mean, I love that it puts a smile on people's face when we talk about the name of it because that movie is so famous. No affiliation except the words that we used,
Yeah.
but I love that people remember it because I think of the movie.
Excuse me. I
Yeah,
gotta interrupt you. This is
yeah.
really cool. This is
Okay.
really cool. So, years ago, there was a lady that was there year after year. She was chronically homeless at the emergency winter. This is when it was an emergency winter shelter only. Now it's a full time shelter. It's there 24/7. The homeless residents can stay there throughout the day and night, and it's wonderful now. There was this homeless lady that was there, and we would serve her breakfast, and oh boy, she was just so grateful. And then one time she came with a thank you card and she handed it to me, and I opened it, and it was addressed to the Breakfast Club. And it was this wonderful thank you card. And I showed everybody that. And ever since that card was given to us, we became the Breakfast Club, and we just grabbed that name and ran with it.
So
And we've
she
been the
named,
Breakfast.
so the lady with her card, she named it. Is
She
that right?
named it. I didn't name it.
Wow.
I didn't
Wow.
name it. We
I,
just went every week and just served. I didn't
that's a
think
great
about a name.
story. I
It's a
love
really
that
cool
story.
story. She's given us that gift of having that name, and now we're known throughout the whole Santa Clarita, community of being the Breakfast Club.
Let's go back a second. If I'm somebody who you just met wherever at the gym or on the street, and I said, "Hey, you're that Breakfast Club guy. What can I do? What would you tell me if I was brand new to wanting to serve but hadn't taken that step?"
Once people show up and serve, they're like, wow, this is amazing.
Mhm.
And I've seen it bring tears to people's eyes that I've invited, they've come to serve and like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is amazing what you guys are doing.
Sometimes you'll be standing there. This happened to me a couple of months ago, and you look across the serving counter, and there's somebody who I knew, and they're homeless. And it was a very quiet moment, but it's not that far away for most of us. Many people are living paycheck to paycheck, and it doesn't take much to cross
Yeah.
that threshold.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because
Okay.
you say these things and these thoughts come to my head.
Okay.
That happened to me. I was in the collision repair business. There was a body technician that worked for me. Now, gosh, I don't know how many years ago, 30 something years ago. Body technician, wonderful guy. He was we were serving him. I couldn't believe it. He became homeless and we were serving him there at the shelter. And I was like, wow, this gentleman worked for me. So, a lot of us are a paycheck away from becoming homeless, and it can happen to anybody.
Other than ways that you can surf with the Breakfast Club, there are many other teams. If you're the person who wants to just bring the kids together and make 100 sandwiches and chips and juices and whatever, and you can contact the shelter to find out what their needs are. But you
Yeah.
can prepare 100 sack lunches or whatever it is, 50 sack lunches, join up with
Yeah.
other neighbors, and you can do it
Yes.
that way. If you don't want to come into the shelter, you can,
Yes.
people can write checks. Some people are more comfortable with that. I do think though that there's something about using your hands to do it, whether it's making the sack lunches, whether it's joining the Breakfast Club, whether it's bringing pizzas at night or bringing prepared foods like a lot of teams do, bring in prepared lunches and don't make it from scratch, but they're still serving. They're still serving their brothers and sisters in need. And I
Yeah.
think that's so amazing and important as well.
Sometimes we don't know what our lane is. We don't know where we're going to be comfortable. So the only way we're going to figure that out is we have to immerse ourselves in volunteering. And if you go and volunteer and you like, oh, I'm not real comfortable with this, that's okay. Don't be discouraged. Just keep your eyes wide open and find out what other serving opportunities there are and try them out.
So, Frank, what I want to do is give people a place to go if they're ready to volunteer or they want to find out what they can do. It's www.btohome.org, not .com. Again, btohome, bridge2home.org. Go there and you can click on volunteer or donate, a number of different options if you want to start to get involved. As we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to my friend Frank Schiro, who is the founder of the Breakfast Club, one of the many volunteer teams that serves Bridge to Home in Santa Clarita. And if you're somebody out there listening to this podcast and you're thinking about doing it again, I'll tell you, if you're not in Santa Clarita, which many of you probably aren't, check out online. It's not that hard to find where you can serve in your own way, however that is, in your community. But for the Breakfast Club and Bridge to Home, again, that's www.btohome.org. So thanks for watching and listening to Trailheads. And thanks again, Frank.
You're welcome, Jim. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.